That's not a good. Hello. Little draft latte situation. All right.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Joe and Joe's podcast of everything. Today, we're going to talk about what is Dungeons and Dragons. We realized a bunch of people that don't know what it is, so we're going to talk about it. We've done 3 episodes so far, and then we realized, because we started posting it on social media, that a lot of people don't actually know what Dungeons and Dragons is. And
yeah, some people got left behind.
And what it
We
is
want to bring everyone up to speed.
Yeah, and what it is a gateway to the devil.
Yes. If legend has it, if you open the player's handbook, it opens a portal to hell. And
that's correct.
You have nowhere to go. You just walk straight through there.
And that's right. Yes.
Yep. Ask your local pastor at your local church about Dungeons and Dragons.
I don't know why. Yeah, he'll give you an interesting response.
Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game. If you're familiar with what that means for video games, it's basically the board game version of that. So you play it, usually on a table of some kind.
That's correct.
Tabletop.
That's correct. So D&D is a strange game to people because like you said, it's played on a table, but you don't actually even need
a table. You can play on the floor.
Like a lot of people compare it to like a board game. Well, you don't. Yeah, you can play it anywhere you want. A lot of people compare it to like a board game, and like I guess that's an okay comparison, but it's kind of a terrible one at the same time. The only thing similar between Dungeons and Dragons and a board game is that potentially there's a board. But basically what Dungeons and Dragons is it is a tabletop role-playing game, tabletop RPG, which is basically where everybody is what's the word people use? It's collaborative storytelling almost, where really no one knows what's going to happen in the story or how the story's going to go. And you kind of all create the story together. There's one person who kind of leads the story as almost like the narrator / world builder, scene builder. But everyone at the table plays their own character that they come created. And it can be, the character can be whatever you want it to be, following the guidelines of specific books. So,
right.
Mainly Dungeons and Dragons is driven by books. There are a few books that are like necessities, and then there are like campaign books or like story books almost. The main books being the Player's Hand Guide or Player's Handbook, which is like what every player should have. That handbook helps people make a character that is what's the word I'm looking for? Not fair, but legal, I guess, to make. In regards to the rules, as well as, it has more information about what you can and can't do. It's kind of like it's like character creation in like a video game. Like you pick your race, you pick your class, you pick your equipment, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But what's cool is, again, you can do whatever you want. You role play as that character. And so you're not limited to the limits of what might be in a video game of like you can jump, attack, and punch. You can do whatever you want, you can say whatever you want, you can go wherever you want, as long as it's within the rules of, kind of reality is the best way to put it, I guess, or reality for that world. Like, for example, when we played our first campaign last year, March of last year, we had a bunch of people that didn't know how to play, and one person made a character, and basically at one point the first thing she wanted to do was shoot water out of her braids and fly away, I think. And I was
something
like,
like
you
that,
can't
yeah.
do that. I was like, you can't do that. And she was like, why not? And I was like, well, because your character cannot. So the point of the books is to kind of, specifically the player's handbook is to kind of tell you what you can and can't do as a character, and you get more abilities and more things that you can do as you actually level up in the game. There's a leveling system like video games.
Yep.
And the only time you ever really use a table or like a board is there's like a grid board system that you can use where you just get a big grid, and usually it's like a white erase grid so that the dungeon master, the DM, can kind of draw scenes and stuff. And there's a big grid, and you use it to kind of better understand fights. So like how far away you are from certain people, how if a arrow could reach someone, if you're close enough to attack someone. So that's really the only time you need a table or a board, but you don't even necessarily need that. There's another system you can use that's just called theater of the mind, where you just do all that in your head.
Right.
And as long as within the rules, and the DM will tell you if you can and can't do something. But that's a quick overview of kind of what it is. But the dungeon master's job is to kind of create the scene, tell the players where they are, what's going on, who's doing what, wherever it is, and the DM plays all of the characters that aren't the players' characters. And whatever happens there, they also play the enemies, the bad guys, the monsters, all that.
Right.
And then the players play their own characters. So that's kind of what it is, I guess.
Right.
Would you add anything to that?
Not really. That's a good description of what it is. Kind of like this collaborative storytelling thing. I think a lot of people that are one of the earliest questions they'll have when approaching the game is like how do I win? Like what's the goal of the game? Because that's like the immediate question when anyone is introduced to a new game, whether it's a board game or a video game. And with Dungeons and Dragons, the point is kind of creating this story with the people that you're, at the table with, and uh, your character you have a goal of developing your character, and the DM who's running your game has kind of a story planned out that you're following. So it's less, you're not competing with the people at the
No,
table. Like it's
no,
not
you're
like
not
one person
competing.
wins. It's not
That's
like that.
that's right. That's a good
Um,
that's a good thing to
yeah.
say.
The
We had a
DM gives you people to beat.
yes.
They supply like the enemies or whatever, and then your characters are working together.
Yeah, for the most part the group works together. We had one player, Brian, before you guys had played. Actually, Brian played first. And we did a one shot. And Brian didn't understand the game really at all. So he he thought there was like a winner by the end. So we did like a one shot, and a one shot is just a one-off game where the story starts and ends within one session. So like when we talk about a campaign, it's the same story. We just pick up where we left off for that whole time. But Brian, for the first session I ever played with him, for this one shot, he didn't understand really what it was. And so he thought there was like a winner. So he would, there was like it was like a small dungeon crawl. He would like run into a room and like slam the door behind him and try and lock it so that he would be able to get all of the stuff inside or whatever it was. And it was really funny. He was like, how do I win? And I was like, no, you don't win. Like you're trying to work together to like create a cool story or whatnot.
Right.
And then, yeah, you're also right in saying that the DM has a story in mind that you kind of follow. But the thing is, like, the DM writing a story or like a plot as a DM is not just like, this is what's going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. Because, again, the DM cannot control the players. So it's kind of like the DM is creating things that are potentially going to happen around you, but the players can change that or alter it, or
Right.
depending on how much freedom you give them, decide not to deal with it or go somewhere else. And so the DM just has to be ready for that.
Yeah. So basically, the way I think about it is, you have if you think about the start and end, and there's a line for this campaign, the players are moving through it like this, and the DM is running ahead of them, setting up stuff for them to interact with
Yeah,
to
kinda.
get
That's a
to that,
good,
and then
yeah.
it ends up at this endpoint.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
good way of putting it. And
yeah,
then sometimes,
and the story
there
could end up going
yeah,
however,
sometimes the
but
players
the
decide to go
DM's
whoop,
got
and the
to lay
DM's
out.
got to
Yeah,
be ready.
yeah,
That's a
there's
great way of
yeah,
putting it. Yeah, the DM is just throwing things in front of them for them to interact with, and it's
right,
up to them to decide how they, interact with everything.
yeah,
And
and so
hopefully
it's a
it just makes a
combination.
cool story.
Right. So it's a combination of like what the DM is preparing to for the players to interact with, and how the players approach those things that kind of makes the story what it is by the time you get to that endpoint.
Yeah, that's a great way of
So
putting it.
yeah,
That's a great
that's
way.
basically how the game flows.
Yeah,
Let's talk about what you need
sure.
for this game, because there's a lot of, you know, people will walk into a board game store, they'll look at the D&D section and just
And
see
it's
a
terrifying.
ton of books and a ton of miniatures and
Yeah,
dice, and it can look daunting.
that's
Uh,
right.
some people will feel like maybe it's like a more complicated game than what it is. Now, to be fair, when you get into like the character building and you're going over your character sheet and you're looking at the stats for your character, that is a lot of numbers and you have a lot of stuff to pay attention to. But we'll get to that. Let's talk about kind of what's your starting equipment as a player. Um,
You've been wanting to do that forever. You've
yes,
been
that
wanting
was
to
the
say
thought.
that from the beginning. What is your starting equipment?
So you're gonna start, obviously, yes, the player's handbook. That is any form of that is good, as long as you have the text that lies within. You can either have a hard copy that looks like this. You can get them on Amazon for around $30, depending on when you look. They sell them in the D&D section of any board game store. You can find them at a lot of bookstores as well, or you can find, I'm sure, a lot of PDF copies of it on the internet for free
Yeah.
or for an outrageous
Also
price.
D&D Beyond.
Also, D&D Beyond, and
Uh,
we'll get to that too.
and
D&D
we'll talk a
Beyond is
lot about D&D
yeah,
Beyond all the
yes,
time.
yes,
Um, yeah. No, 100%. I mean, again, yeah, you're right. It can be very daunting going to the D&D section. I kind of felt bad because we like to go to this place called Third Eye. It's a comic book store as well as a board game store. And I was there once, and there's like 5 other guys, maybe 4 or 5 guys, like just looking around. And they went to the D&D section and were like, they were talking to each other, and they were like, this is a game I've always wanted to play. I just don't know like what to do or like how to play it. And I was like sitting there and I was like, I should 100% tell them that I can DM for them for $500 or whatever it was. I was
dude,
like,
you should have
oh.
done it.
Well,
That's easy money.
I told him to like what to buy or what to look up. And so hopefully they did that. But
Right. And then
I
they
should have
asked
been
you
like,
where
I
the
will DM
restroom
for
was and where they could
$500.
find vinyls, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, that's very true. It can be very daunting. There's a lot of books. But yeah, you're right. The Player's Handbook's great. I highly recommend. I tell everyone. I know I started you guys on it. D&D Beyond. Some people, like the OG D&D players, kind of don't like it. Some of them don't because they're afraid of technology and they like the old pen and paper way. But I recommend D&D Beyond not only for getting all your source books, because you could just use a laptop or your computer or whatnot, but also, or your phone, but also because D&D Beyond lets you make characters there, and they'll do a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
And
D&D Beyond does a
walk
lot
you
of
through it pretty
the
easily.
yeah. D&D Beyond does a lot of the math for you when it comes
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I
your
mean,
stats
because
in
character
certain
creation
roles. Yeah.
itself is pretty difficult if you don't know what you're doing. I
Right.
remember my first time making character, it's like not easy to because when you're making it with pen and paper, because there's a lot of things you have to fill in with numbers and a lot of there's some math to do, and then just like abilities and knowing what you can and can't do. You're constantly like flipping back and forth between pages. It's not the easiest task in the world, but D&D Beyond makes it really easy. This is not a sponsorship for D&D Beyond, but D&D Beyond, feel free to sponsor us.
Yes, please.
We have people in the chat that say hi. Can we get a shout out? Of course you can. Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Anna. If you want to watch us live, you can watch us on Twitch. Right now, it's twitch.tv/gunkball, but maybe eventually. But we might start our own Twitch for maybe next week or something. So
maybe.
We'll get there.
We'll see.
Yeah. So the player's handbook is very important.
Yep.
As a new DM, if you're a DM and you're like, hey, I want to DM, DMing is terrifying. DMing is very scary and takes a lot of prep and practice. So know that you're going to have to plan a lot more than your players are. As well as everything you plan might get tossed out the window like so fast, and then you'll have to just adapt. But I remember one of my favorite stories about this is Brendan Lee Mulligan, if you know who he is. He works for College Humor. He runs a show called Dimension 20. He did this podcast with Matt Mercer, who's the DM for Critical Role. And they were talking about like just DMing and homebrewing and like DM experiences. And Brendan said that his first time DMing, which again is a daunting task, DM put a lot of work in and get really nervous. Most DMs. His first time DMing, he used a source book. I think it was a source book where like basically there was this wedding that was going to be held, and this princess that was in the wedding. And they were all, there's like this princess in the wedding or whatnot. And it was like a dwarven wedding, I think, or something. And they were all invited as like guests, and they're in the wedding. And one of them rolled like a natural 20 insight check or something. And so Brennan, being a new DM, like wanted to give him something for rolling in that 20. So he was like, you can tell that the bride looks somewhat like not bummed out, but like part of her seems like she doesn't want to be there. And she's not excited. And the point of the story was supposed to be like the wedding wasn't important at all. Like they get married and whatnot, and the next part happens. But the group was like, this has just become like a mission, Operation Rescue the Bride mission. And so they like attacked the wedding, or like staged this giant attack and kidnapped the bride and ran away from like the town that the whole campaign was supposed to happen in. And Brendan was just like, like, okay, let's do this. But yeah, it can be that kind of stuff. So you got to plan, but what's necessary? The Dungeon Master's Guide, honestly, I wouldn't recommend. It's very confusing and big. What I would recommend are two different things. Number one, try and run a campaign book. All the other books that you see in the game stores that have titles, like with cool art on them, Descent into Avernus, Icewind Dale, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, all those kinds of books are all they're all campaign books. They're like story books. So basically they'll tell you as a DM how to run the game for your players, like where the world is, what's in the world, what players are in what buildings, what buildings are where, all that kind of stuff. So your players don't need the books, just you need the book. And that's how you can run it. And that's what I would recommend. You can get all those books, again, from board game stores, or you can get them from D&D Beyond, which, I recommend just because you can keep everything in one place. It's just the best. So I would recommend starting with a campaign book. And then there's a book that's out that's very small. I think it's only like 25 pages or something. It's really small, and it's called Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And it's not written by Wizards of the Coast, by the Dungeons and Dragons company. but it's really, really good. It just breaks down exactly what you really should be planning as a DM and what you really don't need to care about. The Dungeon Master's Guide that was created by Dungeons and Dragons is like super big and complex and has all this stuff that they're like, you need to prepare for all of this to happen. And like 4/5 of it can be tossed out the window. Like you don't need, like I don't need to know how the sun works in my world. And like that's not important. And so like the book Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master kind of tells you exactly what you should prepare for as a new DM. So those are the two resources I would recommend. Try a campaign book, and then also get the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master to just know what in that campaign book you should be prepared for. Yeah, but that's what I would recommend as DM. I don't know. Would you add anything else?
No, I'd say, well, it also depends on how detailed of a campaign you want. Like if you're working with a group who they just kind of want more action and they just want to have a good time and they have great characters that they want to have fun with, that's where you can take a more they call it like a hack and slash approach to it, and you're not too worried about like all the details, like yeah, how the sun works, what the whole schedule of every single person in a given town is,
Yeah.
or like all that uh like random infrastructure bits or whatever. Like that's where you can forego a lot of those details and preparing to explain those. But if you're working with a group who wants to be that much more immersed in it and kind of know everything so they can visualize things better, uh, then yeah, maybe read some more stuff out of the DM guide and uh, figure out how to plan out more of those details depending
Yeah.
on what kind of vibe your group is going for the
Yeah.
game. And
And
kind of
and
talk
the,
about that before you start the game
yeah,
too, I'd say. Yeah.
absolutely. And the other thing too, like I know we talked about making like in-depth characters and stuff already, because again we kind of
Right.
jumped the gun on this a little bit. But yeah, I mean I've been in like campaigns where we basically just made like random characters that we were like, this seems like a cool, fun thing to play, and the entire thing was what people in the biz call a dungeon crawl, which is basically where you go into like a dungeon or a big castle or a giant cave or something where there's like a lot of treasure and bad guys, and you basically just like fight the whole time, or you like run through things and loot and fight and then go back to town. Like I did a whole, and like there's no role playing involved. There's no discussing with people. You don't have to talk at all
Yeah.
other than saying what your character would do or what your
Right.
action is going to be. And then there's games that are really role play heavy where it's a lot of talking through arcs and backstories and working out, challenges between players and non-played characters, like the dungeon master controls and things like that. And like the backstory approach that we took, or that we usually take, and we're taking with this new campaign, it's kind of like a mix of both. It's like there's a lot of like fighting and stuff like that, and hopefully some dungeon crawl stuff and whatnot. But there's also a lot of discussion with each other, discussion with other characters in the world, and the backstory kind of lends itself to both of those things. It can help create ideas for dungeons or monsters or groups of enemies, but it can also it adds potential conflict or interesting topics to discuss with other players or other characters in the world that the DM's controlling. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of different ways you can play it. We kind of play a mix of both, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
All right.
So you have anything else to talk about? You
Yeah,
have any
let's
questions?
we covered uh we
We
covered kind
covered
of like how the
materials,
game flows. Yeah.
how the game
Oh,
flows.
you need dice.
Oh, the
Uh
doy.
let's talk about dice for a second. That's our favorite part of the
Yeah,
game.
we never
We're
even mentioned the dice.
we're addicted to just
We're all addicted.
buying so many dice,
We
which
have
by the way,
so
that's not
many dice.
necessary. You
No, it's
you
not.
only need You only need 50 sets of you only need 1 set
No,
of
you only
dice,
need one set of dice, and you can buy it for like
and
$5. There's a lot of different
yes.
looking ones.
Yep,
The most popular one being that 20-sided dice that you see everywhere when someone
right.
brings up Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons.
I happen to have a set here.
Wow, there they
Yeah.
are.
So, here's your D20 right here. I don't
Wow, there
know
it
if you can
is.
see it, but it's a
Barely.
20 20-sided
From 1 to
dice,
20, there it
D.
is.
Yep. And, that's what you're rolling for, like, a lot of your ability checks, like, if the DM says, "Oh, you wanna jump over that fence? Roll me an acrobatics check."
Right.
Then you're gonna roll this, and depending on how high you roll, that determines the success. The DM has a number in their head, like, oh, they need to roll, it's not a high fence, they need to roll, like, a 10 to get over it. So then if you roll a 10 or higher, you you can clear the fence. Otherwise, you might trip over it or you'll fall on your face before you make it there, stuff like that.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, there's also a standard six-sided die that you've seen for any board game
Any
you've ever
game
played.
ever?
Uh, you're gonna roll a couple of these or the one that you have several times when you are setting up your character and have to figure out what abilities are their strengths and
Yeah,
weaknesses.
so let's hit on that for a second. So
Yeah,
we were talking earlier about how, there's a lot of math involved when you're creating your character. And it's
right,
because, and we talked a little bit about, the limits. Well, what are the limits? When you're making your character, it'll kind of walk you through. But yeah, you have different limits to your strength, to your wisdom, like your street smarts, to your intelligence, to, even your like charisma, like how, charismatic you are around people and how you behave around people. And that kind of keeps your characters grounded and not just like I can do whatever I want kind of thing. It's yeah, you create a character in terms of what you want to play, and then you basically have stats. You have a stat sheet that tells you how good you are at a ton of different things: acrobatics, athletics, persuasion, deception, stealth. And so then, yeah, like Josiah is saying, you usually use that 20-sided dice, and you roll that 20-sided dice. The higher, the better. And then you add your modifier, your statistic modifier, based on the ability that you're rolling. So yeah, like if Josiah was like, "Hey, I want to sneak into this kitchen and steal a cookie or whatnot," I, as a DM, could be like, "Okay, roll a stealth check." Josiah would then roll the check with the D20 and then add his stealth modifier. And if it's a high roll, then he has a better percentage of pulling it off exactly how he wants. Now, if he rolls something low, like let's say he rolls a 2, his character still does it or tries to do it, but depending on, again, the roll, there could be consequences. Someone sees him and yells at him. He accidentally hits the cookie jar over and breaks it, something like that. So that's kind of how you create the story, I guess. And yeah, that was a good thing to hit on. I can't believe we forgot
right.
that. That's like the key
Yeah.
part to the whole game.
Is the dice. It's
Yeah,
one of the fun parts too. It's very
it's the
involved.
best. It's the most fun part,
Yeah.
definitely.
There are other dice that you have. There's a four-sided one that looks like a pyramid. Your
Yep.
D4. You have got your D8 that kind of looks like a diamond situation. And those, in addition to your six-sided, are kind of like uh, where you're going to use those most is when you're attacking with different weapons. They have different dice that you roll to like figure out how much additional damage you're doing with those
Yeah.
attacks.
Yeah,
So
like
you're not going to use those very often, but
a
right,
bazooka would do more damage than like a dagger. So for a
right,
dagger,
exactly,
you'd probably use like a four-sided dice to see how
right.
much damage you would do to someone. Whereas a bazooka, you might, which I don't think there's any bazookas, but you know what I mean.
No.
There
But, like,
would
with
you
a like,
might
a bow or
a bow
something
or like a
or a
really
sword,
strong
maybe you'll use
like
a
fireball
yeah,
spell. You might
yeah, you'll
roll
use, like, a D8
10
or a couple
or
D8s.
10 d8s. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's kind of how that works.
yeah.
Yeah.
You also have, a set of dice, that are both ten-sided. One is numbered, 0 through 9 or, like, basically 1 through 10, and then the other one is in tens, so double 0, 20, 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way to 90, and together, these work as a
100.
percentage die. So if you're doing something in the game where it's like there's a certain percentage, one way or the other something goes, or there's like 100 different things that could happen. Sometimes the DM has a list. then you'll roll these,
That's
and
exactly right.
they'll give you that number 1 to 100.
Yeah.
Or you roll some d10s or a group of them if you're like a spellcaster, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and it's the
then
same with the DM too for, controlling the monsters that are fighting you. He also rolls to see if they hit you or if they
right,
miss. And how much damage they do to you. So the DM as well as the players need them. It's not just like the DM
yeah,
decides if they hit or not.
right,
Everything is left up to chance, which makes the game fun because you never know what's going to happen in the story. And
right,
it's, almost out of the DM's hands, or it is out of the DM's hands at a lot of points. Not everything, but a lot of times. So yeah, I don't know how we missed that part.
yeah.
I guess because we
Last
played it so
dice,
much, we forgot.
one more. We got a 12-sided die right here. To give you some idea of its importance, I've never once used it in a D&D context.
Yeah, it's very
As of
rare.
yet. There is a thing or two that you might use it for at some point, but
Usually like
I as a
spells, I think.
player, yeah, like maybe if you're a spellcaster or something, but yeah, I as a player have not had the need to use that die yet. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I can't
maybe
think of
maybe
a time
maybe I
either.
will this campaign. We'll see. I'm a spellcaster
I'll
this
have
time.
to figure out a way where you have to, just so that you can say you did.
Nice.
Cool.
So yeah, that
Yeah,
covers
our chat
kind of the
says I used a
basic.
D12 as a spellcaster. Thank you, Alyssa.
Okay, there you go.
So yeah,
Yeah,
spellcasters use them.
I'll probably use it at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
That's
kind
an
of the basics
overview.
of how the game flows and what you need to get started. Uh yeah, in addition to those things, you need friends and time.
True. Yeah, a session can last anywhere from 2 hours to like we've played I think 6 hours once,
Mhm.
like a few times. In fact, on Monday was our first new campaign session, and I think we played 5.5, something like that. We played from 6:30 to 12, something like that. But anyways, yeah, that's a little bit
Yeah.
about what the game is. Hopefully that helps. I mean, I expect a lot of people listening to this will either be beginners that have played once and just want, more help with figuring things out, or are beginners that have never played and want to just learn what it is. So
Mhm.
hopefully this episode helps.
Yeah.
We kind of we got so excited to start this podcast, we kind of skimmed over thinking about if we should talk about the basics.
Right.
But yeah, that's basically what it is, and
Yeah.
it's
So that's
the best game
that's
of
enough
all
to
time.
get you started. Yeah, it is the best game of all time.
Yeah.
Go play it right now. Stop what
Yeah,
you're
go
doing.
play it. Go find.
Leave work.
And
Clock out early.
final thing I'll say, if you want to play it and you don't have a group, what I would recommend is either there's a lot of groups on Facebook that are just players looking for other players to play in your area. So I would potentially recommend that. Go to your local board game store or comic store. A lot of Dungeons and Dragons has something called the D&D League, where like I think depending on it might be a different day every week, but basically, game stores bring in dungeon masters who are like skilled DMs to play with people that want to play. So if you're like a new player and you've never played before, the DM is there to help guide you through it and help you know how to play. So I would recommend going to your local game store, checking that out, or joining Facebook groups and checking those out. Or finally, the last thing you could do is there's a few websites online. The most popular one being Roll20, where you can actually play like from your computer with other people over Discord or Zoom or whatever it is. So that's the last place that I would recommend. It's called Roll20 if you want to, potentially join a group online because you're bored or whatnot and you don't want to leave your house. So yeah, but I would recommend playing in person if you can because it's just so much more fun in person. But yeah, that's a little bit about it. Cool. Oh, we didn't do our monster of the day, bro.
Oh yeah, we gotta.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, we do. All right. Gotta do this one fast because I have a meeting to get to soon.
Uh-oh.
Anyways, all right. This one is called an ellip. When a creature uncovers a secret that a powerful being has protected with a mighty curse, the result is often the creation of an ellip. Secrets protected in this manner range in scope from a demon lord's true name to the hidden truths of the cosmic order. The creature acquires the secret, but the curse annihilates its body and leaves behind a spectral being composed of fragments from the victim's psyche and overwhelming of psychic agony. Psychic agony. I have dyslexia. Shut up. Every ellip is racked with a horrifying insight that torments what remains of its mind. In the presence of other creatures, an ellip seeks to relieve this burden by sharing its secret. The creature can impart only a shard of the knowledge that doomed it, but that piece is enough to rack the recipient with temporal mental anguish and violent compulsions. The survivors of an ellipse attack are sometimes left with a compulsion to learn more about what spawned this monstrosity. Strange phrases echo through their minds, and weird visions occupy their dreams. The sense that some colossal truth sits just outside of their recall plagues them for days, months, and sometimes years after their fateful encounter. An ellip might attempt to share its lore to escape its curse and enter the afterlife. It can transfer knowledge from its mind by guiding another creature to write down what it knows. The process takes days or possibly weeks. An ellip can accomplish this task by lurking in the study or workplace of a scholar. If the ellip remains hidden, its victim is gradually overcome by frantic energy. A scholar driven by sudden insights to work night and day produces reams of text with little memory of exactly what the documents contain. If the ellip succeeds, it passes from the world, and its terrible secret hides somewhere in the scholar's text, waiting to be discovered by its next victim. So it's like a giant secret. It's like a big thing that has a secret that doesn't want you to know. Don't want to
Dude,
tell
this
you
thing
a
looks
secret.
absolutely terrifying. What if you encounter that and then its secret is like
I got a secret.
The Duke of a local town ate too many donuts for breakfast. It's like
Duke,
something
the Duke of Donutsburg started eating muffins instead.
He ate too many muffins.
He had too many muffins instead of the donuts, and now he's no longer the Duke of Donuts. He's the Duke of Muffins. Wow.
Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone I gave you this information. My name is Ellip.
Ellip.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like a giant thing trying to keep a secret. Or no, it's trying to figure out the secret that it has been told so that they can tell someone else and then leave forever.
Hey, kid, you wanna know a secret?
You wanna know a secret? I can't remember what it is. I wish I could tell you, but it's on the tip of my tongue. It's literally been on the tip of my tongue for the last 100 years, and I can't remember.
The kid doesn't know to be scared or try to be helpful.
Kid's like, what? He's like, look, listen, kid. I've had this secret on the tip of my tongue for the last 150 years. Okay? And I can't remember what it was. And it's driving me crazy.
Going insane.
So I'm gonna eat yous and hope that I die.
I'm gonna eat you, and it's gonna be a secret.
So
and then I'm gonna forget about it.
Forget about it for years, forever. All right. Anyways, that's what an ellip is, and that is the podcast. So thank you for listening. Hopefully you have some sort of understanding of what Dungeons and Dragons is at this point. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, and if you're still confused after this, get help. No, I'm kidding. If you're still confused and you have other questions, other things that you want to hear us talk about, hit us up. We're all over the internet now.
Facts.
We're
bro,
on
facts.
Instagram. We're on Instagram.
Our Instagram is podcasts of everything.
Yes,
Podcast of everything.
Podcast of everything.
Podcast
We'll
of
drop
everything.
a link.
Yeah, we'll drop a link in the YouTube. Also in the description of my Twitch channel if you're watching this on Twitch live on Wednesdays or Thursdays.
And we're also on TikTok. We're gonna be pushing content.
Yeah. But if you're watching on Twitch, if you go to below, you can actually see the link to the podcast, to the YouTube channel. Yeah. You can subscribe there. New episodes every Wednesdays. We go live on Thursdays. All right. Cool.
Cool.
All right. Peace, dude. Peace, everybody.